I think that that's part of the problem. But my honest opinion is that even though, and I was speaking on this a little earlier, even though we can be considered regenerate or born again, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're flawless vessels at all. We make mistakes. Okay? Our worldview can often be the worldview that has been presented to us, and we swallow that as though it was a pill. But I agree with you, Frank. Without a doubt, that's one of the realities. So, in light of all of these rules of interpretation, let's look at one of the more controversial sections in Paul's letters, and we're all very familiar with this. Galatians 3:18 through 25. For if the inheritance is based on law, it is no longer based on a promise. But God has granted it to Abraham by means of a promise. Why the law then? It was added because of transgressions, having been ordained through angels by the agency of a mediator, until the seed would come to whom the promise had been made. Now a mediator implies more than one, whereas God is only one. Is the law then contrary to the promises of God? May it never be. For if the law had been given, which was able to impart life, then righteousness would indeed have been based on law. But the Scripture has enclosed everyone under sin, so that the promise by faith in Messiah, Yeshua, might be given to those who believe. But before faith came, we, i.e. the Jewish people, were kept in custody under the law, being locked up to the faith until faith should be revealed. That should be until the faith should be revealed. Therefore, the law has become our tutor to lead us to Messiah, so that we may be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a tutor. For you are all sons of God through faith in Messiah Yeshua. I took the liberty of messianizing that just a tad, but for the most part, this is coming from the New American Standard. Now that the faith has come, we are no longer under a tutor. A surface reading of this text would lead one to believe what has been commonly taught for a very, very long time. Namely, that the Torah remained in effect only until the coming of Messiah. Very prevalent thought. And it was canceled at his death. Because, of course, the Torah was put to death on the cross. You've all heard all of these terminologies. Okay? At face value, this is a bit troubling considering the eternal nature of Torah. In the Torah itself, Adonai says that it's eternal. So what you see is, to a certain extent, different gods. Okay? Marcion, whose teachings developed in Gnosticism, was the first one to convey this. We talked about this in class 1, that the God of the Old Testament is different than the God of the New Testament. He presented two different gods. Well, that was considered a heresy. Okay? We don't see two different gods. If God says in the Tanakh that his word is eternal, that his Torah is eternal for the people, how does Paul have the authority to say that it's dead, it's gone, it's done away with? Well, that's not what he's saying at all. Okay? At face value, I already said that there, highly problematic sections need to be interpreted in light of others that deal with similar themes, and that is, again, Acts chapter 21. If Shaul behaved in Acts chapter 21 the way he did, what is the intent, meaning, and purpose of what he's saying here? Since we know that Paul was Torah observant, and there is no way that he would say that the Torah is gone and meaningless, what is the context? Who is Paul speaking to here? Okay? He's speaking to the Gentile believers, many of them God-fearers, in the community of Galatia, where he helped establish a community. And he's speaking in the first person plural. When he says we, he's speaking about him and the Jewish people. Him being a Jew, we the Jewish people, okay, and all of those who had converted at that time will become proselytes, who have underwent circumcision and attached themselves to. And we talked about the different classes a few weeks ago. The perspective has to do with the role that Torah plays as an agent of salvation and an agent of justification, and the requirement of non-Jews to observe Torah with this in mind. David Stern translates nomos in a few of these areas as legalism, and rightfully so in the context. or the subjection to a system which results from reverting to Torah and legalism. So let's look at some of this terminology in this text here, Galatians, and see if we can make some sense out of it. Is the Torah the great imprisoner? Well, there's the Greek word that is used here. But the Scripture has enclosed everyone under sin so that the promise of Yeshua, or the promise by faith in Yeshua the Messiah, might be given to those who believe. But before faith came, we were kept in custody under the law, being locked up until faith should be revealed. Now, what do you guys see there? Kind of a tough section, isn't it? Kind of almost like we're in a prison. A little bit negative there, pretty harsh.
It seems more like protection.
It seems like it's protection. It is protection, for sure. But notice the translation, though. Okay, the translation has much more to do with this real sinister kind of this dark thing that, we were subjected to it for a season, but thank you, Messiah is here to deliver us from that, and we're no longer imprisoned. Well, oftentimes, we see in a lot of the English Bibles that terminology just like this is what takes place. As you can see, this is indeed an unfortunate translation which oozes with prison terminology. Who wants to be imprisoned when we can be free? Isn't that sort of the gist of the generation? To be free? Everybody talks about being free, right? Not in subjection. Our modern versions lead us to believe that the Torah was somehow keeping God's people from true faith, imprisoning them and barring them from real relationship, and only through Messiah can real relationship take place. Messiah came to free us from bondage, and if the Torah is a prison, then he surely came to free us from Torah. But based on our understanding of biblical interpretation, again, this cannot be what is spoken of here. You see that word, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, the word that's used there. Rather than enclosed, it literally means to be kept inside. And it's not a negative term at all, but rather one that emphasized the enclosure of all peoples, Jew and Gentile together. Under the Torah, all have sinned and all stand condemned. Remember, what Shaul is talking about is salvation and justification. He's not talking about Torah observance. Okay? He's saying that under the Torah, all people are considered guilty of sin, and all need salvation through Messiah, Jew and Gentile alike. It was also a Greek fishing term for a school of fish surrounded by a net. Now that seems like it could be a little bit of a prison type of a mentality too, but don't take it too far. It really hints at what Paul's talking about, that everyone is enclosed. All are equal. All fish are equal in a net. They're all about to be eaten. Isn't that true? When they have done so, they enclosed such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. And this was the section of Scripture when Shimon was like, I don't want to put the nets down one more time. And Yeshua says, just put it over the left side of the boat one more time. And this is what happens. Same word that's being used here. Kept in custody? Well, not really. More like protected. Okay? Guarded. To be protected by a military guard to prevent a hostile invasion. This is the literal meaning of the word here. Thus, it completely blows my mind that certain words are chosen when they are 4th and 5th and 6th down the list, even in the Strong's Concordance. Why is that so? Years ago, I took a class from Dr. Bruce Stokes. It was a yeshiva through the MJAA, and it was a biblical worldview class. And Dr. Stokes had the privilege of being on the translation team of the 1995 New American Standard Bible. And he lamented to us at the yeshiva course that he was 1 against 1,000, and that his desire was to help portray in this new version of the New American Standard, which is oftentimes considered the more literal of English translations. In fact, the most. He wanted to convey some Jewishness of the text. Okay? Well, he was up against many other guys who refused to allow that to happen. And they would go 4th, 5th, 6th down the list when it came to using words that were negative or imprisoned in their connotation, rather than words that are of a protective and of a guarded nature. Very much like the shomer. This is the Greek equivalent to shomer, which is a guardian, a keeper. He who slumbers, or he who protects Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The same word. Okay? He doesn't imprison them, he protects them, he guards them. One time, Dr. Stokes said he was allowed to interject and have his words printed in the reference section. And if you open up a 1995 New American Standard Bible, you'll see in Matthew 5:17 in the reference section in the middle, when Yeshua says that I have not, Romans 10:4, that when it says that Christ is the end of the law in common translations, Stern translates it, Messiah is the goal at which the Torah aimed for. In the middle column of Romans 10:4, the 1995 New American Standard Bible, it says goal in highlight. And that was Dr. Stokes' work. The one time he was allowed to interject on that team. So you can begin to see some of the problems with translations, because the moment that you start to present things in a positive light, that completely transforms modern theology. Completely transforms it. It flips it on its head. We would never see things the same way. And so you have to keep in line with what you've learned. Millions of people are hanging on that reality. Can you imagine the uproar without a new approach and a new perspective, that all of a sudden translation comes out with a seminarian translation team where they paint Torah in a positive light? What would that do to modern theology today? I can't even imagine. The world would change. It would change. But he was 1 against 100. And this has been to the derision of the greater body and has caused anti-Torah and anti-Jewish sentiment to proliferate. That's not to say that there are not people in the church that love Israel and love the Jewish people. That's not to say that at all. Every Christian that I know loves the Jewish people, loves the nation of Israel. So don't get me wrong here. I'm talking about bias that has been ingrained in us even without our very knowledge, without our understanding. Okay? We know biblically, even according to Rabbi Paul's words, that the untainted Torah is pure and holy, and is indeed the way that his people relate to him and walk out their faith. It is meant to sanctify us and to make us holy. So what is, I'm kind of continuing this from 2 classes ago when we talked, back in the last class. We talked about the purposes of the Torah, and I purposely left one out because it has to do with this Galatians 5 text. Right here. This, what they call the pedagogos, who is the caretaker, translated as the tutor here. Therefore, the law has become our tutor to lead us to Messiah so that we may be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a tutor, for you are all sons of God through faith in Messiah, Yeshua. Wait a minute here. If Torah is the way in which we relate to God, and we walk out our faith, why would Shaul now tell us that we no longer need it? That it's completely obsolete? Would a religious Jew who defended his honor in Acts chapter 21 and in other places say such a thing? We know that he wouldn't. And a lot of people throw in the towel in areas like this. And they say, this is just too confusing. I can't do this. I need somebody to explain this to me. Okay? And many times I've seen people throw in the towel on Shaul's letters because of the difficulty in understanding his intent and thought. Well, one has to remember the way in which we interpret Scripture, and I can't say that enough. Now, this pedagogos, this caretaker, tutor, custodian, guardian, does not necessarily have a negative connotation at all. And when you begin to find out what this individual was responsible for, it completely transforms the way in which you think, especially this text in Galatians 5. They were caretakers who were hired or purchased by well-to-do families and would be assigned as a servant or a warden for their children. Child conductor is the literal translation or someone responsible for the conduct of a child.